Hello, everybody. This is Pulp Christian. I'm Dave.
I'm Tyler.
This is the podcast where we talk about Christianity and we answer some questions.
And we talk really fast. Yeah, on today's episode, we have some...
This is a bit of a more lighthearted episode.
We're going to talk about all your favorite cults, all your favorite cult leaders, all your favorite brands of Kool-Aid. Okay, can I tell you a quick story?
Okay, go ahead.
So to start this episode off, I will talk about how we are going to talk about cults today. And there was a time when I was in church doing my due diligence to meet and greet, talk to all the new people who walk through the door, present a crest smile and a firm handshake back when you were allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And so I met this young woman.
And you gave her a sweaty Jimmy Dean sausage-fingered handshake.
That's right.
As you do.
That's right. And so I said, how's it going? Is this your first, you come here often? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, what's a bar like you doing in a girl like this?
Exactly. And so she said, no, this is like my second, what am I saying?
My tooth time.
This is my tooth. This is my second or third time coming here. And I said, cool, man. Did they make you drink the Kool-Aid yet? David, was that your phone?
I do not know how
Just throw it across the room. Put it in a steel bucket with a soundproof lid.
You saw me turn the volume all the way down.
I saw you get them wet.
I used the same soap you did. My hand didn't look like when I was done. That's a Pulp Fiction reference.
Which is loosely based off of our podcast. And so I says to her, did they make you drink the Kool-Aid yet? And she gave me a weird look. And our conversation was over briefly, and she stopped coming to our church for a very long time.
Why?
After she came back, I was talking to her, having no idea that I was the reason she stopped coming to our church. She said, yeah, do you remember when you asked me about the Kool-Aid thing? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, you didn't know this, but I grew up in a cult, and I was really weirded out by the fact that you said that, and I took it as kind of a bad omen, and it took me a long time to be willing to walk through these doors again.
Dang.
So.
Well, you know what the Bible says about people like you.
What?
It'd be better if you tied a millstone around your neck.
Call me Stumbelina.
Stumbelina.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah, so cults.
Yeah, cults are crazy. Do you remember a few years ago? It was what would that be? 9 years ago, 2011.
Mm-hmm.
When May 31st, 2011.
Back when Jesus returned.
Yeah, do you remember that?
I do.
So that's one of the things we were going to talk about. So there was a fella, a bloke, as they say across the pond, named Harold Camping.
Harold.
And shall we take our next caller, please? Thank you for listening to Open Forum. He had a radio show called Open Forum with Harold Camping. And
on Family Radio.
It was, Family Christian Radio. And the weird thing about this guy was, well, he had a habit. he had a little problem with predicting the end of the world.
Yeah.
He had done it
Fool me
4 times.
Fool me once.
So he wrote a book called 84 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Occur in 1984. That was his first hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I think was 1992. I think it was 92 or 94.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, so the last time he did it was May 21.
Well, that was a third of 4.
Right, because
yeah.
then he changed it.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Spoiler alert,
it didn't happen. But it was so much fun because me and Tyler, I had a blast. It was so much fun. That was the golden years for me.
Really?
Not really. But me and Tyler would listen to his radio show
Mm-hmm.
and just laugh and laugh. And
Which, in retrospect,
did you know?
yeah.
I watched to prepare for this episode. I watched a mini documentary on him.
Mm-hmm.
So all of his followers who believed him, they sold everything that they had. I mean,
Well, not all of them, but yeah.
well, like a huge
Tons,
majority of
yeah.
them. They
He
sold
made like $100 million.
the ad campaign because they would sell all their possessions
Mhm.
and they would put up huge billboards. They'd
Yeah.
hand out flyers. I'm sure people listening remember at least some of this stuff.
Right.
They spent $100 million doing that.
Yeah.
It's the
we
most-
live in...
That was the most expensive, if you're referring to it as like an ad campaign or
Right.
something. It was like the most money spent on something like that.
And we live in Iowa. This
Right.
was a national thing. And even in Iowa, there were people handing out flyers. Like it...
Yeah. Even up in Pella.
Yeah.
Because we went to the,
The Tulip Time, or whatever it's called.
Pella Pride Parade. Or whatever, where they worship flowers. So anyways, so this dude, I mean, I listened to his show every day.
Yeah.
Because I was like, this is...
And what else did you do regarding his show?
All right. Well, this is... To date, this is one of the strangest phone conversations I've ever had.
Apart from your conversation with Bill Schneblin.
Well, that was weird too. But
Anyways.
we should do an episode on Bill
Yeah.
Schneblin.
A whole... yeah.
We could get him on the show.
If you can't see my face right now, I just was frozen in time because
Like, I have his phone number.
that's the best idea I've ever heard. Okay, you guys
Okay,
at home can Google Bill Schneblin, Schnoeblin, something like that.
E-N.
E-N. And we'll catch you in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Back to my story. So
you called?
So I called Family Radio. I called them. Now, I didn't realize that his Harold Camping's daughter was like the girl that answered the phones. So I called on May 20th because I wanted to get like some T-shirts or flyer. I wanted some memorabilia.
The day
Apocalypse
date was the 21st, and you called the day before.
The day before.
Yeah.
So she answers. She goes, Family Christian Radio. How can I help you?
And she talks exactly like her dad, I assume.
Yeah.
Family Christian Radio.
Family, hello. I am a girl. Anyway, she's like, how can I help you? And I said, yeah, I was wondering if I could get like some flyers or like some T-shirts because they had T-shirts there.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, can I get some T-shirts? And she goes, well, no, because the world is ending tomorrow. That's what she said. And I was like, yeah, but can't you just mail it? And she goes, it won't get to you. The world is going to end tomorrow, so it doesn't matter if I send it to you.
Okay, pause. Wasn't the whole thing was that Jesus was going to return, but then there'd be 5 months of tribulation for the remnant?
Yeah.
So, like, she doesn't know that the unsaved mailman is not going to get you your package.
Yeah, but that's what she said.
Okay, well, anyways.
I mean...
Agree to disagree.
Yeah, but, and she was like, well, you won't get it because the world's going to end tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh. And for a second, I stepped into her mind because I was like a rational person.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
This is a farce. This isn't going to happen.
But what if?
What if? And then when she said that, I was like, yeah, I mean, I know what you mean, but okay.
Like, what do you lose just for
doing it?
Putting the order in.
Yeah. And what I should have said was, well, you know what? You're not going to get raptured because you're so lazy and you're not doing your job. I didn't say that, though.
Yeah.
But I didn't get it. They didn't send it.
You should have called 2 days later. Hey, remember me?
Can I get that shirt now?
It's me again. Yeah.
So.
We like to have a lot of fun here. But yeah, I do want to mention that what is awful about it, it was like, from one standpoint, really fun to be in that time and to like see how much traction a craziness like that got in the world.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was a very horrible thing. I read online that one girl actually committed suicide once because she believed that the world was going to end, and then it must have terrified her or something. People gave their life savings, like parents of real children with real needs gave up their jobs and just quit.
Yeah.
People left med school, quit jobs, spent life savings on cruise ships, and just wanted to live out the last few days in a life of leisure. And so, yeah, and then once it didn't end, like, what do I don't know. There's no follow-up stories on any of these people, but I imagine they're not good,
Yeah, I mean, it devastated. I mean, $100 million, and all that money was not from rich people. It was just average Joes.
Right.
So, like, that's a lot of people.
All the rich people are doing Scientology.
Yeah.
They're 1%ers anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. But.
Just kidding. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that we like to kid around. I mean, this is like a serious show and an entertaining show, but it wasn't really a funny thing if you think about it. It was pretty awful.
Right.
And that's kind of one of the reasons we wanted to talk about cults today, because of the ramifications. And we'll get into, if this was a sermon, the last, 10 minutes would be practical application. And I think that's what we're going to do anyways. So, yeah. But we, as far as Harold Camping, he was in a Doomsday Cult, is what they call them.
Mm-hmm.
So groups that believe Doomsday is coming, characterized by fanaticism, devotion to their leader, even when their predictions turn out to be false. Because, like you just said, Harold Camping, he believed it was initially going to end in May, which was the third prediction, and he still had all his followers.
Yeah.
And then they substantially dropped off after May, but immediately he predicted October of that same year, 2011.
Right. Yeah. And because everyone was like, well, why should we believe you? You literally failed. And he's like, no, this one is for sure.
It was a spiritual judgment day.
That's right. That's what he said.
Yeah. It's pretty slick, but people, third time, they stuck with him for the first two, and then after the third one, nobody. I read somewhere that his congregation dwindled to 100 people or less.
Yeah.
And then after his final one, he finally admitted that he had read the Bible wrong and misinterpreted it and stuff.
Their yearly budget was $70 million.
Yeah, it's wild.
Up until he did that.
Yeah.
But in the end, Harold Camping repented of his sin. He said he had sinned.
Mm-hmm.
And that he was wrong.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
That's
cool. I mean, I wish it would have been nice to see some proof in the pudding. He was already bankrupt by that time, but because initially people asked him to give the money back,
right.
Reporters and stuff. Are you going to give the money back? And he said, no, because the world hasn't ended yet. So the ministry still continues. But then by the time he admitted that the world wasn't going to end when he thought it was,
the money had been spent.
Yeah, it's already been spent, and he was bankrupt. So
yeah,
but anyway.
And then he died shortly after that. He had a stroke first. So what happened was, the dude was in his late 80s, I think. He's very old.
Yeah.
And the world didn't end. He had a stroke. I think it was 2 months after that. And then after he recovered from his stroke, he did a news interview, and he said that he felt that the stroke was God sort of trying to snap him out of his delusional way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he said, I sinned. This was sin, what I did. And I'm sorry I did this. It was wrong. There's no way to know when Jesus is coming back. He completely repented publicly.
And said the criticisms lobbied against him were accurate.
Yeah. And then he died.
Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of doomsday cults, both sort of that label themselves as Christian and some that don't. There's obviously, my church faux pas about drinking Kool-Aid. What was that one called? Do you remember?
Wait, what?
Where they drank the Kool-Aid?
Jonestown.
Was that a Christian cult?
No.
No, it was just...
well, he was called the Reverend Jim Jones. I don't know a ton about their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were trying to start. Didn't it have something to start with the Garden of Eden? Like they were trying to rebuild the earth, or
Something like that.
I don't. I
I
really
read
don't.
about it, but I don't remember. I did so much research. I feel like they're blending together. But the interesting things about Doomsday Cults specifically is how much, it kind of sounds like some people today, because one of the arguments I feel like we could make is that cults could be seen as a shade of gray. Everyone thinks of cults as like this far out there idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to argue today that it's more of a shade of gray than we tend to think. Kind of like how Jesus said, if you hate somebody in your heart, you're guilty of murder. We think of the bad people are the murderers. And Jesus says, well, you're all kind of guilty of that.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, and with the, the preppers and people, and, I just watched a video the other day of a guy saying he received a vision from God that basically not the world was going to end in October, but that it was going to get basically twice as bad as it is now. And he saw like schools on fire and people wanting to overthrow the government, and just
So the
it comes in shades. Like there's
right.
a lot of variants on the same sort of using the return of Christ or rapture or whatever to manipulate people.
Yeah, my question with people like that guy who said he had a dream, I've had weird dreams before that seemed really plausible and real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how do you know if this is a real prophecy? Well, in Deuteronomy 18:19, God's talking to, or Moses is talking, and he's telling the people what God said. So in 19 it says, I will personally deal with anyone who will not listen to the message the prophet proclaims on my behalf. But any prophet who falsely claims to speak in my name or who speaks in the name of another god must die. But you may wonder, how will we know whether or not a prophecy is from the Lord? If the prophet speaks in the Lord's name, but his prediction does not happen or come true, you will know that the Lord did not give that message. That prophet has spoken without my authority and need not be feared.
So I've started building a guillotine in my front yard because I'm open to the idea of stuff happening in October, but if it doesn't, like I'm going to invite this guy over for a nice dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And then
hide the guillotine in his food.
Yes. And then he bites it and it chops his head off. Doesn't it literally say to cut a false prophet's head off somewhere in the Old Testament?
I don't know. It's just what I read.
Yeah.
But
enough.
It's like, if the prophecy or the or the whatever, the word or whatever, it's like, does it further the gospel?
Mm-hmm.
Does it glorify Jesus, or does it glorify the person who's saying it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who Sylvia Browne is?
No.
Oh, so Sylvia Browne, do you remember Montel Williams?
Yeah.
TV show?
Big fan.
Yeah, Sylvia Browne was this decrepit, gross old woman
mm-hmm.
who was a psychic.
Was she communicate with the dead? Yeah, I think I remember her.
She would communicate with the dead, and what she would do, she would sit in the, she would be on the show.
Yeah.
And then anyone in the audience, she would be like, if you have a dead loved one,
oh yeah,
I'll communicate with them. And if you go on YouTube and type in like Sylvia Browne fails,
mm-hmm.
She
fails.
She fails. Like, she failed so often. Like, there was one when there was this lady, and she was like, I lost my fiance like 10 years ago, and I've just never been able to get closure, and I just don't know what to do. And then Sylvia Browne goes, oh, honey. And she had this voice. Mm-hmm. She was like, they're never going to find his body because he was in water. And when a body dies and there's in waters, it decomposes and you can never find it. So they're never going to find his body. And then the lady looks really confused, and she goes, but But he was a firefighter in 9/11. And then Sylvia goes, wow, oh, wow. And then Montel Williams pipes up and he goes, well, maybe you were seeing water because, firefighters use water to put the fire out.
Yeah,
and
just like how Blastoise is good against Charizard.
Right. And then Sylvia Brown's like, yeah, that's probably what I was seeing. And then there was another one where it was this guy and his wife, and they're like, our daughter died 20 years ago, and, she just left us so suddenly. And Sylvia Brown interrupts them and goes, somebody shot her. And the dad goes, she died of a heart attack. And she's like, I just keep seeing something hit the body. I don't know.
Yeah. A corpuscle or something.
Yeah.
Struck her. Yeah, that's... Sylvia Brown. Yeah, that's wild to just, like, take that big of a shot in the dark that was almost guaranteed to be wrong.
Right.
What
were we talking about?
Cults.
Cults.
Another... Well, so Dave and I had a cult experience. We...
In Culter.
Yeah.
Like encounter.
Good one.
With cult in it.
Bad one. And so we went to this church. We got invited. We picked up a dude he was hitchhiking, and we picked him up.
No, he was our neighbor.
And then he wanted a ride, which is kind of like hitchhiking, kind of like the exact same thing. Thanks for interrupting. No,
okay, sorry.
I guess he wasn't hitchhiking. So anyways, he asked us for a ride. We gave him a ride, and we started sharing the gospel with him.
No, remember? We had a Bible in the car.
Oh, did we? Okay, you tell
like,
the story. I don't remember.
No, I want you to tell. Remember, he was like, is that a holy Bible?
Yeah.
Don't you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Because our Bible didn't say... Like, it was so unspiritual of a Bible that it just dared to say ESV on the side instead of saying...
MacArthur Study Bible.
Or whatever. Yeah, instead of the Holy Bible on the front cover.
Yeah.
So we've rectified that mistake and burned that Bible. But he was mad because it didn't literally say the Holy Bible on the front.
Yeah, he's like, is that a Holy Bible? And we were like,
It has to say Holy Bible on the front. So anyways, we started talking. We shared the gospel with him, and he didn't believe like what we were saying. He's like, well, if you get saved, you never sin again.
That's right, yeah.
And so we were like, wait, like never? And he's like, yeah, like if you sin again, you'll go to hell. And we said, what? And then I was like, have you ever heard of Jesus' command, or when he says, like, if you look at a woman with lust, you commit adultery in your heart before? Have you ever heard of that? And he goes, well, I mean, nobody's perfect. I'll just get baptized again. And so anyways, he ended up inviting us to his church.
And he asked us if we spoke in tongues. And
yeah, because you had to, that was one of them places. In order to be saved, you had to speak in tongues.
Yeah.
So do you want to...
Sure.
When he invited us to his church?
Yeah, so this gentleman was of the African-American persuasion. And so he invited us to church because he was basically like, you guys are lost,
Yeah.
You guys are totally wrong. So come to my church and you'll get it right.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay.
But if somebody asks you why you're here, you have to tell them I invited you.
I forgot. Yeah, he was very specific. He was like, you're my guest.
Yeah.
Like people can't know, or like you can't just go into my church. You have to be invited.
Mm-hmm. Like a vampire.
Yeah, so we were like, okay. So we go to this church, and the pastor is a fella named Jeremiah Reed. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a Christ Apostolic Temple.
Yeah, that was literally the name of the church.
Denomination, yeah. So we go in there, and it was nuts. The pastor... Well,
first of all, can I set the stage?
Yeah.
So we walk in. There's giant glass doors, and in like 400-point font is the words "No gum chewing."
Right.
And then
like
above,
in the lobby.
Yeah. Like the number one message we need to communicate before you walk in this room.
No gum.
No gum chewing. And then above that is a picture of the pastor and his wife.
With photoshopped clouds around them.
And rays of light and white raiment.
Right.
Yeah.
So we go in and we sit in the back, and immediately everyone's staring at us because we're the only white people in that church. Mm-hmm. And there was like, remember the ushers?
Yeah.
Or they were not ushers, they were bodyguards, or they were security.
Mm-hmm.
They were pacing up and down during the sermon like bulldogs. It was like kind of intimidating.
Yeah. They asked us like, who invited you? And the guy was like, oh, I did,
Right.
But
yeah, it was like, papers, please. Like in Indiana Jones, the Nazis. And the guy, the pastor, you could barely understand what he was saying. It was like that old-timey type preaching, but I remember we walked in and he's like, Lutherans are going to hell. Catholics is going to hell. There ain't no Trinity. There's only one God.
Yeah.
Lutherans ain't nothing but Catholics. They all going to hell.
Yeah.
All right, offering time. And then he wiped his whole head down with this rag. Remember? The woman that kept bringing him rags? And she was sitting off to the side folding up these rags.
Yeah.
And they would just switch them out because it was so sweaty.
If they touch the ground, you have to bury them like a communion wafer.
Yeah, right. And so he's like, offering time. And then everyone gives their money.
Uh-huh. And then also you could ask questions.
Yeah, question time. So, but the way it worked is you had to put a question in the bowl.
Mm-hmm.
They passed a bowl around. And what was our question?
We asked, and it wasn't answered, but somebody else asked a similar question. We asked something to the effect of, I think, something in regards to like the biblical gospel and like how he disagreed with it.
I think the question was, why are you so wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is our question.
And so somebody else asked a question, and this was the one that he chose to answer, which was if you sin after you get saved, like, are you good or do you go to hell?
Yeah.
And he goes, if you make a commitment to God, that's a covenant, that's a promise. Just like a woman makes a covenant to a man when she marries him. You see, and then he points this woman out, like very close to the front. He goes, you see this woman right here? She promised her husband she would never touch another man.
On his deathbed.
Now he's dead.
Yeah.
But if she touches another man, she's going to hell. Like he said, just like that, it's the funniest thing in the world. And just called this woman out, like
if she ever gets remarried.
Or even touches a man, presumably. Yeah. Right. Or if she ever gets remarried after her husband died, she's not only sinning, but
that woman going to hell.
Yeah. So it was bad.
Yeah, it was crazy. And because, like, there was no... Oh, and he was talking about... he was like... He pointed behind him. There was a baptismal font. And he's like, if you want to get saved, we'll baptize you, and then we'll tarry for the Holy Spirit. And we asked the guy we were with, we're like, Terry?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, move, Terry, move! Oh, Lord! Have you seen that?
No.
With the fireworks?
No.
All right, I'll show you afterwards. Anyways, Terry meant wait.
Yeah. I watch enough Leonard Ravenhill sermons that I know that.
Okay.
But...
So basically they believe that in order to get saved, in the apostolic faith, you get baptized... And then...
Cry out to the Lord until you speak in tongues.
Yeah, that's the evidence that you have the Holy Spirit, is that you'll immediately be speaking tongues. Mm-hmm. So, which is just wild.
Yeah, and as far as, like, maybe right now this church seems like it's not a cult as much as it is just wrong or something. Dead wrong. But, so the interesting postscript to the story is a couple years later I was working and I met a girl who went to this church. And we had some really good conversations. And she ended up leaving and started coming to my church. And that's cool and all. And she had talked about how she really liked this guy, but he wouldn't give her the time of day, didn't really like her, and she wasn't really super popular in the church anyways. Kind of sort of an outcast, which I think was part of the reason why it was easy for her to leave. So anyways, fast forward to a couple months of her coming to my church, and she mysteriously vanishes.
Yeah.
And so I saw her at work, and I said, hey, where you been? And she's like, you'll never believe it. And I looked, and she had a engagement ring on her finger. And the guy who never had given her the time of day before suddenly showed up at her house with half of the church. And they begged her to come back to church, and he proposed on the spot. So
Are you serious?
That's how we know it's a cult. Yeah. And those are some real cult-like behaviors of manipulation and being super against you
Just
going anywhere else.
okay. Think about it from this dude's standpoint. So
Right. That's
he clearly didn't like her like that.
right.
And then the pastor was like, "You gonna marry that girl? We need her back."
Uh-huh.
Like, what goes through your head to where you're like, you know what? I don't want to be here anymore. I don't like this.
Yeah, I think it's just so ingrained in you. And the thing about, if we can get serious for a moment, like the thing about cults that's so pernicious is like pernicious. Isn't that a word?
It's a good word. Yeah.
First of all, most people who are trapped in them grow up in them, so you don't know any different or any better. And we're so often a slave to the worldview of our parents for a really long time. But I mean, they all claim to basically be like the beginning and end of knowledge, and everybody else sucks. Like everybody else doesn't have access to the truth, but we in this room, we know the truth, so we've got to stick together. And there's subtle ways that they convince you that everyone out there is
dangerous.
Yeah.
Or, you know, the devil.
Yeah, it's like Mother Gothel and Rapunzel. You know? Everybody out there's got fangs, and you can't leave the tower or you'll die.
Yeah, that'd be scary.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of religions like that, like the FLDS.
What's that? Is that Fred Phelps?
No, they're the Mormons. The Mormons that have the polygamy.
Oh, okay.
The FLDS, the Federal Latter-day Saints.
Oh, okay.
I think it stands for federal. But they were like that with Warren Jeffs, the Branch Davidians.
Yeah.
In Waco, Texas.
Can you talk a little bit about? Do you know about them?
Were
they Christian cult?
David Koresh claimed that he was Jesus.
So yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
But the Branch Davidians started. The Branch Davidians is a branch of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
And are they the ones that, like, made the men eunuchs?
No, that was Marshall Applewhite and the Hale-Bopp Comet.
Oh, yeah.
Those people, which that was crazy because those were all doctors. Like, they were all very, very intelligent people.
Mm-hmm.
And their website is still up.
Really?
But they haven't changed it, so it's the original website. Yeah, Marshall Applewhite. If you remember the Hale-Bopp Comet back in the 90s, they all drank Kool-Aid and castrated themselves. And they all wore those white sneakers.
Oh, and they put a bag over their head and huffed like something, right? Barbiturates. They took barbiturates and then put a bag over their head and suffocated to death.
Yeah. And I think that was in California. And then, yeah, there's a bunch of them. Like, there's been a ton. Right now, currently, I think there's 4 people claiming to be Jesus.
Yeah.
One's in Russia, Australia, and I think the other 2 are in the United States.
When you see cults like that, I think it's the same as when you see a murderer and you're like, and you see people say, well, I'm not a bad person because I compare myself to him. And it's easy to compare our theology to cults that wild and think maybe things aren't that bad. But I'd like to read, there's 10 signs of a cult that are basically to watch out for. Because I think, real fast, what I was going to say is, you know how, like, when you see somebody being really crazy to their kids in public, you know that it's way worse at home? Or for every public display of violence, there's probably 100 that don't get shown in public. So I think in the same way, for every 100 cults, there's probably 1,000 subtler versions of those same behaviors, that lead to cults. Sure. So here's 10 of the signs of what it is to be a cult. So absolute authoritarianism without meaningful accountability, no tolerance for questions or critical inquiry, no meaningful financial disclosure regarding budget, expenses, unreasonable fear about the outside world, which we talked about before, and then such as an impending catastrophe, evil conspiracies, and persecutions. So, people that just will not stop talking about how persecution's coming. It's coming.
Right.
It's coming from the liberals or it's coming from wherever. some of that is probably true, but some of it seems like is just a subtle version of this same wild thing. Number 5, it says there's no legitimate reason to leave. And you can stop me if you want to talk about any of these.
What do you mean, no legitimate
No
reason?
legitimate reason to leave. Former followers are always wrong in leaving negative or even evil.
So they keep people in the cult.
Yeah.
Or they're dismissive if you come to them and like, look, I want to
cool.
leave.
It's cool for you, but it's not for me. And then immediately you're like, well, if you leave us, then you were never one of us. That Bible verse that people use,
Right.
Yeah. Former members often relate the same stories of abuse, so they're
corroborated.
Yeah, corroborated, yes. And reflect a similar pattern of grievances because it's difficult because a true church will be slandered, but sometimes slander is true. There are records, books, news articles, or television programs that document the abuses of the group/leader. Number 8, followers feel they can never be good enough. So
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about. Have you heard of cults doing stuff like that?
Yeah, yep. So what that is they want to keep you dependent on them. So for instance, it's kind of like, with the Branch Davidians,
Mm-hmm.
this is a weird example, but there was an FBI informant or an undercover agent who infiltrated them, and he got to know.
He did have to let David Koresh marry his wife.
Not really.
He was in deep cover.
David Koresh, he got to know David Koresh really well, and one of the things he said was like, they would go target shooting because David Koresh liked to shoot guns. And everyone intentionally lost because the idea is no one can be better than the leader.
Oh, wow.
And so keeping them dependent on you.
Oh, so kind of like a Kim Jong-un thing of like, he's basically perfect in every way.
But not only that, like anything good that you do, they won't acknowledge it because they don't want you to get any sort of independence. You have to be relying on them. And also, a lot of abusive relationships are like this, where, like, if the husband is the one who makes all the money, usually he doesn't want the wife to work because he doesn't want her financially independent, or, he'll always say that she's dumb, or it's just very, very abusive and manipulative.
Yeah.
But the idea is to sort of cripple you mentally so that you can't leave.
Yep. I read a story. This is random, but I read a story online recently. There was a woman asking for relationship advice, and she was like, we got together, like I think she's like, I'm 19, he's 35.
Dang.
We got together 5 years ago, and blah, 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 blah. And she was talking about all these like weird, things that he was doing in their relationship, and it's like, hold on, let me do the math real fast. So 5 years ago, you're 19 now, and he's 30 now, and 5 years ago you got together. And she literally saw nothing wrong with what was happening, and all these people responding were like, hey, wait up, go back a second. And she...
So what? How old? 19 minus
5, yeah.
Okay.
So she was like a victim of...
Dang.
Statutory rape, and had zero idea. And all the abusive behaviors that he was showing, she had zero idea of. And that's the thing about being in that situation, or a cult like situation, is oftentimes you are being abused and don't even know it.
Right.
So
you're so manipulated mentally. Dude, stuff like that makes me enraged.
Yeah.
I hate predator type people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes God is just, and I am thankful that hell is real. Like, when I hear about stuff like that, it's like, you know what? God is just.
Yeah.
Because, like, God will punish all of that stuff.
Yeah, like the verse you quoted earlier about the millstone around your neck when you make one of his little ones stumble. It's like he views his children like,
right.
Hello, his real children.
Yeah, God is a God of justice. And, like, all these sickos are these cult leaders and stuff. God is dealing with them. If they're dead, he's dealing with them right now. But still, what do you think about this? I think that sex offenders and like rapists and stuff, I believe they should get the death penalty. Like pedophiles.
Wow.
What? I do. I've always felt that way.
Really?
I feel that pedophiles should be executed. I think rapists should be executed. I think that's just as bad as murdering someone. Because you've destroyed, if someone's diddling kids,
I mean,
you destroyed their whole life.
I don't know how I feel about the death penalty in general, but one thing I will say is if murderers should get the death penalty, then I agree with you. Like, if anyone should, they should too. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I strongly dislike those people. I know you're not supposed to hate people. I strongly dislike them, and I wish death upon them.
Here's number 9.
Okay.
The group leader is always right. We kind of talked about that too. That's like the Kim Jong-un thing, I guess.
Yeah, just sort of don't use your brain.
Yeah.
Like, if they say something that contradicts themselves, don't point it out.
Yeah. And then number 10, the group leader is the exclusive means of knowing the truth or receiving validation. No other process of discovery is really acceptable or credible. Which, not only are they...
Read that one again.
The group leader... So the first part is... I'll read it again, but the first part is talking, like what we said before, of we have the truth and nobody else does.
Uh-huh.
But the second part is also interesting. So it says the group leader is the exclusive means of knowing the truth or receiving validation. No other process of discovery is really acceptable or credible. So it's like you're not allowed to have any sort of a, God encouraged me with this verse if it's not first through the leader.
Oh, man.
Kind of a thing.
There's got to be...
There's got to be a better way than
there's
cults.
There's got to be a way to, like, help people. I don't know. I'm sure there's organizations or something to help people like that, because that's scary.
It is.
People are evil.
Yeah. If you're listening and you've gone through anything like that, and you feel like you don't have anybody to talk to about it, maybe some of this is a realization to you now, then you can reach out to us. And I don't know if we have any resources we can point you to, but we can be a listening ear and we can talk and share truth.
Because also, so we're talking about cults, but I would say almost everything that we're saying is also abusive relationships.
Yeah.
Because
that's true.
They operate the exact same way.
Yeah, there's the same code book.
If you're in this situation...
And parents do that too.
Parents do that too. It's hard, And
that's why I think there's so much shades of gray. It's easy to say, my church isn't a cult, or my parent or my spouse doesn't do all of those things, so I'm okay, I think, right? But if there's 2, 3, 5, 7 of those things that it sounds...
The other thing is, when you're in a situation like this, you second guess yourself all the time. But it's like, there's this old saying, like, you go with your gut. Your gut instinct about a lot of these things is usually right on. Even if you can't articulate it, it's like, I know that this is not right.
Yeah.
Something's off.
Yeah, certainly there's pride and everybody thinks they're right, and there's people that disagree with leaders just because they're men typically, and they want to be the leader themselves, and I'm guilty of that often. But yeah, I mean, what Dave said is true. Like, if some of these are true and they're corroborated with other people, then it's probably a bad situation.
Yeah. So
we here at Pulp Christian, we love you and we care about you, and we want you to get out of there, head for the hills, and start your own cult. There's a lot of money in it.
Apparently.
Yeah.
If you do it right.
Just don't. If you kill
yourself,
they
always end up killing themselves.
Yeah, that's the problem. You can't spend your money that you made off of all those people if you do that.
Well, their problem is they usually run afoul of the government.
Yeah, that's true.
Or it's either that, or they start...
All the men are realizing, hey, he's got all of our wives.
Exactly.
This ain't good.
Yeah.
Hold on.
He's got my wife.
He's got my wiener. I'm not going to leave that in.
That man stole my wiener.
Did you say I uninstalled my wiener?
Maybe.
Do-do-do. That's an uninstall noise.
Yep. So I guess this took a different turn. But if you or a loved one is stuck in a cult, I guess you can contact us and we'll try to contact someone else to help. 'Cause I don't know what we would do.
Yeah, we can talk to you though.
But we want to help.
Yeah.
We'll do what we can. So.
We love you. Stay safe out there.
Love you.
Blessings.